There you go.
How are you relating to your spouse? Do you have at least 3 people that you can call on in a time of need? Do you pause before reacting to your emotions? So let me give you an example. My husband and I, something that we really, really value is food as medicine. All emotions need to be acknowledged, but not all emotions need to be analyzed. Emotions leave you clues. So you're right. And when I got up onto that stage, I had a chance to be creative and I had a chance to speak my mind. And so my challenge to you is, can you identify those people? Because I hope and pray that they're in your life.
Hi, everyone. Dr. Alex Tam here from Life by Design podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Shahana Alibhai. And she is a mental health specialist from Vancouver, Canada. So what she specializes in, not only speaking to a lot of business entrepreneurs, business owners, but also helping moms with postpartum and also teenagers with their mental health as well. She speaks that we need to work on acknowledging our mental health, acknowledging it, but to the point where we need to see where is it coming from and knowing how our feelings affect our emotions. And she's going to talk about how that in turn affects your business as well. So without further ado, Dr. Shahana. So hello, everyone. This is Dr. Alex Tam here with Life by Design. We have Dr. Shahana here from Vancouver, BC. And she's an amazing speaker, has been on TED Talk, speaks in front of people all the time, done tons of podcasts. It's a blessing to have you, Dr. Shahana. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Oh, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be on here talking to your audience today. So for me, like you said, I'm based out in Vancouver. I always use this analogy. If I was at a dinner party, the first 3 things I would tell you is that I'm a mom, most importantly, of 3 boys under the age of 7. I'm a physician that mainly works in the space of youth. And when you're dealing with youth, a lot of the times it's mental health. So that's really at the top of the menu there. And last but not least, but closest to my heart, is that I speak. And I speak about something that, as you can tell, will be very close to my heart, once again, is mental health. But how do we tackle this beyond just meditate more, move more, yoga yourself more? There has to be other ways.
Absolutely. So in terms of people in their business, you run a business, your husband runs a business, right? How did this all got started from the get-go?
Yeah. It all got started actually from my own personal business, which I call me getting on more stage business as a speaker 3 years ago when I got on stage to do my TED Talk. And I thought to myself, one thing you have to realize too is that there's so many of us that have invested not just a few years, but decades of postgraduate education into something. And we see this countless times. And we feel that because of that, we need to do that exclusively in our life, as if we're shackled to that profession. And that's how I felt about medicine. Let's be honest. I felt that I was completely suffocated by the 4 walls that I was in and day out. And when I got up onto that stage, I had a chance to be creative and I had a chance to speak my mind. And from there on, I went on to give talks to different corporations and educational institutions and nonprofit institutions, and found that when you chase your dreams, because chase is a verb, you actually have to do the work. That's where I felt my calling.
That's awesome. Now, a lot of our listeners are business owners, real estate investors. What have you seen in the last couple of years with what has been happening in this world done to not just, teenagers, but how has it affected people in business? What do you notice?
So my primary speaking engagements are with real estate investors. That's how I got my start, and that's what I continue to do to this day. So I find them a fascinating group of people. And I actually just gave a keynote to a different province here in Alberta for the Calgary Real Estate Association. And I told them, I said, you are a group of people, one of the most hardworking groups of people, but it's very difficult to be in a profession with the level of uncertainty that you have to deal with. And the old adage that 1/3 of you are coming, 1/3 of you are leaving, and 1/3 of you are staying speaks to that, speaks to the uncertainty. So I think one of the themes that we really broke down was this idea of irrelevance in the profession. This idea that it's really difficult to go one day where your phone is ringing off the hook and you are the most popular thing to the next day, because of the markets, no one's picking up the phone and no one's calling. So that idea of constantly being a self-starter, constantly working on your business, for your business, despite what's happening with your clients and the market, was something that was a huge theme that really came up. And that intrinsic motivation to keep going no matter what's happening on the outside too.
So how does someone continue to keep themselves going? You know, in a business, as a business owner myself, and you and your family as well. Yeah. How do you keep yourself going every day?
Yeah, it really comes down to your value system. So when I introduce myself right now, I told you my identity. I told you that I'm a mom, I'm a speaker, I'm a doctor. That tells you nothing about what I value. How often have you thought about what you value? We don't just spend any time thinking about that. Not at all.
Not much.
Not at all. But this is where the work needs to be done, because once you understand your value system, and this is why you are attracted to certain people, whether it be your spouse, whether it be friends, because it's not because we're all speakers. It's all because we share a similar value system. So let me give you an example. My husband and I, something that we really, really value is food as medicine. That is something that we strongly believe, that I'm a doctor, more powerful than any pill is what you can put in your mouth, right? So if that is what I value, then I will go out of my way. I will even spend my dollar and put my dollar behind getting healthy, organic food, spending time trying to cook, because that is something for myself and for my kids that I really believe has longevity. But I've already identified that on my value system list. So you ask, how do you know, or how can you actually spend that time appropriately? Because there are so many things trying to grab your attention.
Right, all the time.
All the time. Like, are we going keto, paleo? Like, there's just like, people just don't know. But if you kind of hone it down to what you believe in, for me, if it's food as medicine, okay, then I don't care what fad diet is going on. I just know that there is power in food. And the same way, for example, you can use the words for exercise. For me, it's just move my body more. Doesn't matter if there's so many different SKUs and mantras out there, that doesn't matter. But how do you move your body? And that's what I value. So if you can be very clear about what you and your partner, if you have one, value, then you start to balance each other. Because guess what? In life, you're not always going to be 50-50. It never is. Someone's sick, someone's got a big work deadline, someone's, maybe struggling with a bit of a low mood or anxiety one day. So you need to know, I've got 80%, you've got 20%. As long as you both make up 100%, you're good.
Absolutely. Working as a team is key, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about food, and food is something that I talk to people about as well. How much does food influence our mental health?
Yeah. Well, look at now that in Harvard, there is a branch of learning called metabolic psychiatry. If that doesn't tell you anything, like, we are understanding more and more the role of perhaps even, I just spoke about a diet term, but it's actually not a diet. It's been around for decades, the ketogenic diet, and the role in mental health, for example. It's been used for centuries to treat epilepsy. I bring this up because you can't get away from this stuff. So it has a massive role. And with the youth that I see that I just told you, they're between 12 and 24. Many of them are in the foster care system. Many of them are living on their own. Their breakfast, lunch, and dinner consists of something in a bag that they have to pull open, i.e. chips or things like that. And then they come to me with all sorts of a milieu of mental health systems. So I can see it completely relationally, that there is a huge influence and overlay between the two. But at the same time as well, I think if you look at my optimal health pyramid, which is on my website, the food, the exercise, and the sleep are in the middle part of the pyramid. The bottom part, the two most important things are how you train your brain, getting to understand what your emotions are serving and doing for you, and the connections you have with those that you love. Those are the foundation. Everything else comes second.
Wow, that's very, very powerful. How do people get more of that foundation? I believe that's where a lot of people are lacking nowadays. Do you see the same thing?
Completely. I just recently spoke to a group of engineers, and after the entire 1 hour session, which went really well, in that session, I dived into the fact that your emotional health is your mirror to your mental health. Forget mental health. Mental health has such a stigma. People think, well, I don't have a diagnosable mental health condition. That's not one of me. And many of your business owners, listeners might feel the same way. So I scrap mental health and talk about emotional health as the mirror to mental health. And that's what we need to work on. And this group of professional engineers after the hour session said, that's all well and good. I just don't have the time. I just don't have the time to feel anything. I don't have the time.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So therein lies the issue. If you don't have the time, if you don't value feeling something, and it doesn't mean having a breakdown in the corner, it just means a microsecond of going, yeah, this is what I feel. Can I acknowledge it? Because guess what happens? You do one of three things. You suppress your emotions, like I do. You deny that I even have something called an emotion, or I'm going to blame you. It's your fault that I have the emotion. It's one of those three things. And it comes out at the most inopportune times.
Right. I can speak for myself where whenever an emotion comes, if it's not an emotion that I feel like I like it, I would try to just, you know what? That doesn't, I'll suppress it. You know, I'll suppress it and I'll say, you know, this doesn't align with where I'm trying to go. Right. So what do you suggest? Do you suggest listening to it and then figuring out and see what it really means?
So all emotions need to be acknowledged. Not all emotions need to be analyzed. All emotions need to be acknowledged, but not all emotions need to be analyzed. Emotions leave you clues. So you're right. What you're doing inadvertently is skipping to the last step. Was like, this emotion, does it serve me? Which is a pivotal question. Does it serve me or does it not serve me? Is it aligned with my value system? Is it going to promote me forward? Because you are very forward-thinking, business-minded, let's get on with things. Amazing question. Awesome question. But the first 3/4 of that is trying to go, you would not have the emotion if you didn't value that thing. So let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, I told you that I had 3 boys. I was dividing some candy amidst my couple young kids, and I unevenly divided the candy. My middle son said, Smarties, I'm happy. I don't care how much mommy gave me. My eldest son, who to this day is 7 and values fairness, black and white, must be cut down the middle. The candy wasn't divided equally, and he had a raging fit at the age of 5. Came towards me, punching my thighs, and I'm going like, what is happening? But I could have said, stop it, chastised him for feeling that way. But the reason he had that emotion and not my middle son is fairness was what he valued. He needed that. So your emotions leave clues. Your emotions actually leave 3 clues. The sensation in your body, why you notice that you're having an emotion in the first place, the story that's playing in your head, and a signpost. What do you value? So if you've gone on to the serving and how do I shift out of that emotion, we've lost the part of, well, what story is it telling me? And what is it trying to signal to me? And all of that takes time. You don't need to do it for every single emotion, but it's amazing if you start to listen to that. Right. You actually understand a lot more about yourself.
Wow. Now, how about in the last 2 years during the pandemic, the amount of emotions that people have had? I mean, it's just got to be super confusing for a lot of people, and let alone the business owners, but their kids and their family, right? What do you suggest? How do you suggest people deal with that? You know, not only on their own, but their whole family as well.
Well, you bring up this issue of, especially with the pandemic, and what the pandemic added onto the mental health pandemic isn't new. It's always been there. It's just gotten more of a light or a lens shone on it. But what added fuel to the fire was the isolation piece. So if you go back to that pyramid that I was talking about, the foundation was 2 things. Remember, it was think better, how to train your brain, and connection. So we just took 50% of the foundation of most of us, well, all of us really, over the 2.5 years completely out, which is why we all fell flat on our face. because you can move your body and exercise and sleep well, but if we are not connected with each other, really nothing else matters. So it was the social isolation and loneliness that was the match that ignited this entire thing. And we've known now that loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes. And, there was a Harvard study, one of the longest Harvard studies done, where they looked at men, because a long time ago, Harvard only accepted men. And the researchers now are saying, I don't care about their cholesterol. I don't care about how well they slept. The number one measure that the researchers needed to know to predict their longevity was how connected those individuals were.
That's the same study that went through 4 different directors.
That's right.
I watched that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is mind-blowing. So that's the piece that you speak about too, I think, is really the emotional confusion and how that isolation just added to that. And what happened is people just we just talked about what do you do with your emotions, suppress, deny, or blame. We just lived in a world of suppression and numbing, hence Netflix.
Right.
That's what we did.
And when someone's emotions are not right, how have you seen that affect the real estate investor's business or the business owner's business?
So you know what? I think business owners are really good at hanging and clawing on to their business as long as possible. I'm married to a chiropractor. I see the business side day in and day out. Do you know where it comes out? It doesn't come out in the business. It comes out in your personal life. It comes out in your personal life. You guys will continue, pounding the pavement until you get the job done, because I've watched and seen and studied real estate investors, administers hundreds of surveys to you guys to try to figure out your persona and psyche. But the key questions that I see start to go downhill: how are you relating to your spouse? Do you have at least 3 people that you can call on in a time of need? Do you pause before reacting to your emotions? These are the types of questions that I start to see the responses going. So that's where it comes out. I think it really does, because you can keep up that act and persona and start to use that side of your brain because you're really good at it. But the minute that you come home and you're trying to interact with others, you're no longer that person anymore. You're a different person, right? And I think that interaction becomes jaded a lot of the time. And we see it over and over again. And I always say the most expensive thing in your life really can be a divorce, right? So, there's many reasons for that. And if that's what you need to do, absolutely. But if it is preventable, we just talked about, if you suppress your emotions, it will come out at inopportune times, oftentimes during your marriage.
So then how, as a business owner, so you're suggesting that the best way is to really acknowledge the emotion. And know that it's there. And what those 3 points that you talked about earlier.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a wonderful app, because what I'm asking you to do now is that you've had 30, 40, 50, 60 years of paving this railroad track in your brain. You're going to listen to this, and by a couple of hours, you're going to forget everything I just said, because we do the patterns that we do for the last decades. So a really simple, easy app is called Mood Meter. Mood Meter, it's designed by a professor at Yale, Dr. Mark Brackett. It's 99 cents. Anytime you're feeling a little bit stuck, you feel like you have a uncomfortable emotion, remember, no emotion is good or bad. It's just comfortable or uncomfortable. There's no such thing as a good or bad emotion. And I never learned that in medical school. Why would I, right? I was taught early on that I could only feel the good emotions. Be happy, be jovial, be content. Life doesn't work that way. Every single uncomfortable emotion is trying to teach you something, but you need to be able to name it accurately, and that is the first step. Name the emotion accurately, but we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the vocabulary, most of us. So that's why this app called Mood Meter, if it's one thing you download, one thing you take away, and one thing you use when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, it can make a huge difference. Because I went on in my life thinking I was the tired mom for years. Was I tired or was I depleted? Was I tired or was I overwhelmed? Those are all different.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing with that. That's like the $1 million answer right there. Now, what about your personal life? Dr. Shahana, your husband, the 3 kids, how do you talk about others' mental health, right? How do you deal with it on your own? How do you interact with your family? Do they look like, is she trying to analyze me?
I know. And sometimes my husband and I do that. We're like, nope, not right now. Not right now. This is not the time. And sometimes you have to just let the wave pass. Like, it's not the time to go, well, really, how do you feel about that? Like, because when you're surrounded by 3 screaming kids, you got to do what you got to do too. So, but you know what? I think like I said, it comes down to value systems, and also comes down to being really honest. Like if you've heard my other podcast, for those of you who are listening, I don't come by this innocently. I've had my own mental health struggles that I've spoken extremely open with on different shows too, that were actually surpassed the postpartum period that started when I was actually 4 or 5, and I didn't discover until I was in medical school. So all of these things have been part of who I was. I have just been so incredibly embarrassed, and I've had so much shame around this. And I think now when I have a patient before me, when they are trying to explain their story, I am given a second to go, do I lean in or do I lean away? Because when that patient is sharing their story with me and they're so vulnerable, it takes that split second for them to see my body language and go, does she have me in this? Is she going to catch me in this? Or does she go, oh, I don't know what the heck you're talking about, right? And I always say my patient's ear is unique as a snowflake, especially to my youth patients. But nobody wants to be unique when it comes to true mental health. Right. Everybody wants to feel like they are held, if that makes any sense, right?
Right.
So when it comes to my own dynamic, one thing you have to realize, and I have to realize too, is that mental health is not linear. It's not that I had it and I'm over it. That it doesn't work that way personally for me. Every day is a little bit different, and I'm very open and honest with my kids. I was open and honest when I was taking medications, for example. I was open and honest when I was going for counseling. It doesn't look that this is a scar that is completely healed. It's not like that, right? So I think we need to change our perception of mental health too, that it's like you're climbing a mountain a little bit every day, and it goes up and down and up and down, and that's the way that it works. So setting more realistic expectations. But what are your buffers? Your buffers are being surrounded by people that care about your physical and mental health as much or more than you do. People that care about your physical and mental health as much or more than you do. That is a big statement. Because that's big. That is what my husband is for me, and that is what I am for my husband, and that is what my friends are for me too. That is what you need to surround yourself with. People who prioritize your health even more than you do your own. Because sometimes it's easier to prioritize someone else's health than your own. So my challenge to you is, can you identify those people? Because I hope and pray that they're in your life, but you need to start identifying them.
Wow, that's really, really powerful, Dr. Shahana. Thank you for sharing that. Now, obviously, knowing what you do and seeing everything that you do, you and your husband have definitely a level of success. One of the things that I like to ask our client or people that we are podcasting and interviewing is, how do you take the money that you have made, that your husband have made, right? And we're going to turn the script for a little bit. And how do you invest it? How do you provide legacy for you and your kids and design the life that you guys want financially?
Yeah. That's a really, really good question. I think it's so interesting is the minute you asked me this question, it was the emotion that I felt was feeling quite uncomfortable. And the reason I feel uncomfortable is because this is what my husband does a lot. I think it really, the question you ask for all those female listeners a lot, I know I am completely guilty of it. When it comes to money aspects, we divide and conquer. So I will do the household stuff and my husband will do the investment money, that kind of thing. But it does speak to the fact that women need to be equally in tune to this. And luckily I am to some point. But I think the what you brought up too is, so for what we do, we have obviously a financial planner, a lot of diversification. We've actually gotten my son involved in a little bit of stocks and trading as well for him to start understanding this as well. A lot of it, there's, weekly deposits into the kids' education fund, which is huge. A lot of the different funds, a lot of mutual funds and GICs are huge for us as well. But really, we were able to purchase a real estate investment recently, but it's interesting with the interest rates going up, that has become more of a hindrance than a help too. So I think we're trying to balance the investments versus cash flow in order to have these other opportunities, right? So we wanted to make some improvements in our house, and we decided actually against that because we needed that cash flow to pay for the real estate investment with the rising interest rate. So it's all of these different things that we have going on for us right now. But I have to say too, for me, I work part-time. My husband is the primary breadwinner, if we're being truly transparent here, right? So I think everyone might have the perception of, oh, you're a doctor and you're a chiropractor and, money might not be an issue, but you need to work in order to get the money too, right?
Absolutely.
So I think I bring this up for a lot of your mothers and your female listeners here, which I'm sure are a huge proportion too, because we are the ones often trying to juggle who's taking kids to activity, who's picking them up from school, who's doing all this stuff, and still trying to work on our careers. So yeah, financially you do take a hit because you have to make sacrifices. But at this point in time, I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. No, I do agree that, I hear a lot where the doctors and the business people that we work with, they're like, well, doesn't your wife work on the business with you? How come she's not in the clinic with you? And I said, she does so much more handling everything around the household than you could imagine. I don't believe moms and women in business or supporting roles get enough attention. And I tell my wife all the time, I said, what you do allows me to do what I do. There's zero way that I'll be able to do what I do without her doing what she does. What kind of struggles do you see moms or supporting spouses go through?
Oh, do we have another hour? No, but you know what? I have to know what you just did there is let's rewind that portion of when you asked me, where do people see the fracture in their business or personal relationships? And I said often personal relationships because people are not acknowledged. What you just did there for your wife, and I'm sure she's listening or there somewhere close by, we don't acknowledge our loved ones for a second. We don't ever say, if you didn't do that, I couldn't do this. Thank you for. We never do that. And you know what, moms, and a lot of, if I can speak for the female gender, we want acknowledgement. We need it. We just need it like blood. We need that. We need that to feel because we, I think, are born as givers and always just from even a motherly role, constantly serving others. But it becomes a time where that well starts to run dry. And you need someone to go, you know what, thank you for doing X. And if that happens on a daily basis where you're acknowledged for your efforts, because a lot of the time, so much of the work that we do is completely silent, right? And it's a lot of grunt work, right? You get those cuddles at night, but it's only after changing diapers. And, it's all of that leads up to that 5 minutes of, this is why I did that sort of thing, right? So do not underestimate the power of going to your friend, your family member, your spouse and saying, I really want to acknowledge you. Use those words. I want to acknowledge you for. And guess what? If you have a team, do it with your team too. Every week, every month, when you sit down to go over your things that you might need to go over, use the words, I want to acknowledge you for. There is no better feeling than that.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you think back lastly, say 15 to 20 years, when you first got started, what message would you give yourself? What's the one most important thing you'll tell yourself?
Don't be so scared. Don't be so scared. I always call it your emotional bed. And to this day, my emotional bed is fear. I spend a lot of time in the space of fear, but I think a lot of me was so scared of failing, right? When you live a life where you're the top of the class and everything is the top, 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 the thought of failing was almost as if I couldn't exist if I made a mistake. And then here I was, I moved halfway across the province, 5 hours away, spent $40,000 in chiropractic school, realized after the first day it wasn't for me, reapplied to medical school, which was a shot in the dark. So it's almost like I spent my early 20s with zero mistakes, walking a life of a tightrope. And then within the span of a year, I made a numerous amount of mistakes all clustered together. And I fell flat on my face. So now I teach my kids, they're skating right now. And one of the first thing their coaches told them is practice falling. Do a practice fall, practice fall, practice fall. I never knew how to practice fall until I fell flat on my face. So I think for me is don't be so scared, because even when you do fall, you have the strength somewhere inside of you to pick yourself back up. But I never gave myself that opportunity.
Wow. That's very powerful. Dr. Shahana, thank you so much for all your insights. The app. Once again, what was that app one more time?
It was called Mood Meter. Mood Meter.
Mood Meter.
Yes.
Well, you guys better hop on that. Dr. Shahana,
Yes.
how can people reach out to you if they ever need your help?
Oh, amazing. So go to my website, drshahana.com. You can send me an email right there. Follow me on Instagram at the Dr. Shahana. Send me a DM. Would love to connect and interact with you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Great being here.
Hey, thank you for spending time and watching this video. For those of you who want more videos about entrepreneurs, business owners, and look for ideas on how you can improve your life, watch one of these videos above. And if you need to reach out to Dr. Shahana and chat with her, or maybe she is going to be great for your company, as she is a phenomenal keynote speaker, a speaker on mental health and how it challenges and affects people in the corporate world and the work world, make sure you contact Dr. Shahana. Have a great day.